is Hunter Jones, of course, and I've actually got little introductions about me slide. Again, Hunter Jones, I've been married to about 4 years now. We've got 2 daughters. The oldest is 2 and the youngest is about 5 months. I'm 22 and my wife is 20. Yes, we've been married for 4 years. We get a lot of funny looks when we go out in public, and a lot of people assume we got married because we had kids, but no, we were married. We settled down. We've been pretty much on our own for the entire time. We have had help from family a little bit. We've lived with parents a little bit when the need came, but for the most part, the majority of the time we were on our own. We're considered a low-income family. We are technically underneath the poverty line. I'm the sole income, and I make about a little over $20,000 a year, which some people look at that number and think that's crazy. I've been asked, how do you live on that? And it is hard. It is a struggle. There's not a lot of extravagancies. There's not a lot of extras. Now, that being said, we have a roof. We always have food. The lights are always on. We've always got water. Christmas still happens. Christmas is not a big deal, but it's still, my daughters love toys. They love to play. They're children. So we're still able to provide some of the wants for them, but it is difficult. We do have to focus a lot more on how we spend our money. And I believe that gives me a unique perspective on this whole topic. Because most of the time when you hear about income inequality, people are going to present it either by saying there's people that make too much money, and they're going to present saying income inequality is bad, we need to fix it. But how are we going to fix it? They're not really equipped to address some of the concerns, because people that have never been in a low-income situation really don't understand some of the challenges associated with it. And I think that puts me in a unique perspective rather to bring to this topic, is that I can see it from this side. And also, my family, my dad is fairly well off. He makes about $150,000 a year. He's been working for that his entire life. He did not start there. He's built his way up. And he's the one that really taught me about work. He's the reason I can make $20,000 a year work. He's the reason that I don't think that I'm going to be in a bad place forever. That's why I'm going to school. That's why I have a job, a stable job, where I am being promoted because I was taught the value of hard work from a young age. And my dad again, he's fairly well off. So it's not like I come from a family of poverty. I can't say that I was born in a bad neighborhood where we starved some nights, and no. My father and my mother divorced at a young age before I was 1. And so I would spend my time between the two families. My mom's not very well off. She paycheck to paycheck. And then my dad is living fairly well. Doesn't have to worry about money. He doesn't have to look at his bank balance every day to make sure he has the money to put gas in his car to go to work the next day. So it's really, that's where my unique perspective comes from, is I floated back and forth between the two houses. I was able to see how those that have the income, the expendable income, don't have to worry about how they're spending their money as much, versus having to check having to make sure you have the funds to get by. So that's where a lot of this comes from. I am a student at Kingwood. I'm getting my associates next semester, working towards my bachelor's in mathematics from a 4-year and then medical school afterwards. I know, a weird combination. My wife's working on her bachelor's in psychology with a long-term goal of a doctorate in psychology, focused in criminology. So we're not just sitting around, even though we are low income and it is harder for us to do stuff, we still make it work. Fortunately, there's grants and stuff like that help us, but that's where a lot of this comes from. That's why this is such a big issue for me, because income inequality is such a big deal. There are people that are making billions and billions of dollars, and there's just as many people. I mean, I'm on the higher end of poverty, the higher end, with the poverty line for a family of 4 being right at 24,000 and some change. There's people that make, I have friends that are making, $10,000, $15,000 a year, and they've got a family and kids as well. And so I can see, that it bothers me really bad that we have such a gap in income. So with that, basic introduction about what we're going to go over today. First of all, we're going to define income distribution is the way it's distributed amongst the demographic, just a fairly broad definition here. We're going to focus primarily on the people of the United States, and then even more focus on the communities in which these higher education institutions are located. Houston being the one I'm going to look at the most, because it is the one with the most availability for me to look at. So the gap I was talking about earlier, how there's people that make so much money and some that don't, it really hasn't. It was a problem back in the early 20th century, the early 1900s, around the mid-20s. There was a large gap as well. Soon after, though, it declined, and then really in the last 35 years, we've seen it increase again. It's become a big deal, and people thought that it was going to go back down as it did between like the 20s and the 70s. It started to drop, and then it shot back up after the 70s. But we haven't really seen any decline recently. And then the institutions of higher education, excuse me, they feel they have a responsibility to the community in which they are located. And they do, to some extent. They need to inform the communities, they need to educate the communities, and then there needs to be programs to help with that. After all, if you look at the communities that they're in, we'll say Lone Star College, the communities that they're in, they're subsidized partially by the government, so taxpayer money goes to them. They do help with people, like Dr. Tice was saying, that wouldn't normally go to school, they wouldn't normally be able to obtain an education, because a four-year university is a larger commitment, it's a lot more expensive, and that's great. But they do have a responsibility to help the community in which they reside, because the community also does a lot for them. And then we're going to present the problems with the current programs that they offer, and then the issues with the actual pedagogies. It's been such a hard word for me. I wanted to say pedagogies every time. And then we're going to look at a couple of solutions to these issues, hopefully solutions, rather. So first of all, the Gini Index is something that, again, Dr. Tice covered. It measures the income distribution across the population. Here's a couple. It's actually a curve. If you're into math, it's based off of a Lorentz curve, and they use integrals to determine the area under this curve is the way the wealth is distributed. Gini coefficient of 0 is perfect distribution, meaning the bottom 50% receive the lower 50% of the income, and the upper 50, the percentage is split fairly well. And then a coefficient of 1 or an index of 100 is imperfect distribution. You have one individual that receives 100% of the income for that demographic, and then everybody else is just kind of left out in the cold. So here's a graph just showing a couple. If you ever look at a plot of a Gini index and you're wondering, hey, what's going on there? This is more or less, generally, your perfect is 1, and then as it gets to eventually 0, it would come straight along until you hit right at 100 and shoot straight up. So that's generally what's going on there, and that's a little bit of a better explanation about the way the wealth is distributed. And so there was a cool quote I found. It was Teddy Roosevelt. This was back in 1910. So this shows that this income inequality problem is not a new problem. It's not something that, again, we've just seen recently. While we have seen a spike, the problem has been around for a while. It is a lot to quote, but primarily I like the conflict between the men who possess more than they have earned and the men who have earned more than they possess. This shines a real big light on income inequality as a whole. When you look at this upper echelon of wealth, you look at the top 100 billionaires, you'll see that most of them are CEOs, they're presidents, they're in charge of something. They're not the ones that are on the floor producing the materials with which they sell. So you're not going to see Bill Gates in a programmers meeting at Microsoft regularly. He may drop in to see what's going on, but you're not going to see him. No. Now that's not to say he hasn't worked his way up. I'm not going to try to take away from those who are at the top, because there are some that have made it to the top through hard work. Bill Gates started Microsoft out of, I believe, a garage. You've got like Apple, same thing. So these companies that have came about that have these CEOs that are multi-billionaires many times over, most of them have worked, but there are the few that have not. There are some that came into it through a family inheritance. These are the billionaires that are not the CEOs and the presidents. They come through it to a family inheritance. The first one that comes to mind of a wealthy person would be somebody like Paris Hilton. Now, not trying to knock her directly, but I don't know about anything she's done that's wealth-worthy.
Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Donald Trump. I mean, there really are a few that have worked their way up, but it seems like a lot of them are old money or from companies that were already established that they just kind of hopped into and then it took off. So this is just something to show that it's not a new problem. This problem has been around since the 20s, since the 10s, since even the 19th century. As long as there has been money, there has been and will be wealth inequality, because people are naturally inclined to protect what they have, and then as American people, we're trying to get more. We seem to be obsessed with money, and this really leads to a big part of our problem. So a brief history, again, of the income inequality. You look at 1928 was one of the big spikes at 24%. Now this is the share of the income from the top 1%. This is how much the income they brought in. So in 1928, the top 1% of earners pulled in the top 24%, or pulled in 24% of the income, which is a huge gap. That is just incredibly mind-blowing if you think about it. That the other 99% had to share the 76% that was left. That is just mind-boggling to me. And then what you start to see is, I put this in here just as like a time frame reference, and World War II did have a lot to do with the decline of the top 1%'s income. But near the end, around World War I, the end of it, you see it start to drop a little more. So in 1950, it's down to 50. These are approximate values. 1950 it was 15%, 1960, and then up until 1970 was the valley, the primary valley, and that was at 9%, which is still pretty crazy to think that 1% of people earned 9% of the income. But it's a little better than 24%. And so obviously before 1928 it had begun to start going up, and then 28 hit its peak and then dropped. And then near the beginning of the late 70s, early 80s, it started to go back up again. And people looked at it as, oh, okay, we're going up again, it happens, we're going to hit some new revolution, industrial, technological, some kind of revolution, it's going to start dropping. Well, people begin to worry, and in 2007, the book I got this from is The Great Divergence. I don't know if you've read it or not. It's a really good book that discusses this, and this was the latest figure that he had in there. 2007 was 24%. I think today we're somewhere around like 27, 28. It sounds... So it's still going up. That's the problem. That's the biggest thing there. Now, a big thing to look at is when it starts to decline in 1928. That was right around, Great Depression was coming up. Yeah, Roaring '20s was ending. Great Depression was coming up, and bad things were happening. So after the Great Depression and after the war, we had the drop. And so it seems like as we start to approach these higher levels of income distribution, from looking at it, it's right before major financial troubles that we have these gaps. That we have the top 1% earning the top 24% of income, and then bam, Great Depression. So it seems like if we continue going at this rate, there's going to be a problem. There's going to be some form of economic problem. We did have the recession, we had the big thing with the housing bubble, we had all that, but it seems like it was nowhere near as bad as it was during the Great Depression. That's why it was the Great Depression. So it seems like we'd be approaching something more if we don't do something about this. As these percentages keep going up, people become more and more frustrated that they're not earning enough, and these people are earning too much, and that's what we're here for, is to discuss this, to discuss income inequality, and that's why we have this conference. So now we're going to actually get into the institutions of higher education. So this is the Houston area. Now I understand University of Houston is the system, and it's got UHD and then UH Clear Lake. I just listed them separately because putting 3 campuses in one doesn't look as good. So you've got 4 major universities in the Houston area, and then you've got 23 campuses in the Houston Community College system, and then 7, I think Dr. Chai said 6, I may have fat-fingered that and hit the wrong button. So there's 34 campuses in the Houston area, so it seems like that since we have these 34, we would have a better base of operations, so to say, with which to inform the community. We should be able to, with 34 campuses, distribute information to the surrounding communities that would help with people with knowledge, with people understanding what's going on. And the 16 school districts is in reference to the Lone Star College system. There are actually 16 school districts in which the Lone Star College system is located according to the state of Texas. So these 7 campuses serve 16 school districts. If we assume HCCS and the rest of them, that's quite a few school districts. Now there's going to be some overlap because HISD is fairly large. But it's crazy how many of these districts we reside. So there should be a lot more people that have knowledge about what's going on. The problem is there's not. This is the big issue we're facing with the institutions of higher education and the communities. To be perfectly honest, I didn't know about this until about a month ago, and only because I saw a paper on a bulletin board. It was a call for papers. It said, hey, submit your papers, submit an abstract with the information that you think, and then we'll review them and see what happens. Well, I got accepted for this, and it's great. But I didn't know about it. There was no major hype about it. There was a post on the website You could go to the Center for Civic Engagement's website and check something out. But other than that, there really was no information. And I found that through asking people outside of the schools, outside of just in the everyday people that I meet, either at work or primarily at work, is they don't know about economic inequality and they don't understand what it means to them. The overall resounding question is when I present the same information with the top 1% of earners is, what does that matter to me? How does that affect me? And that's scary, is that we're not, as an institution of higher education, serving 16 school districts approximately with 34 different campuses. We should be out there informing people, hey, look, this is a problem, and this is how it's going to affect you. People don't realize that just because they think, oh, they're doing great, they're doing fine, but statistically that leaves less for the rest of everybody. For the lower 99% to have to fight over the low 76% of the income, 74% of the income, eventually that's going to start hitting home. That's going to start getting into people's homes. That's going to start getting into the way people live their lives. And it is going to affect them. But by that time, it's too late. By the time people start seeing the impacts personally, it's too late to really do much about it. Because once you have an issue, once you have an emergency, if you're not already prepared, you are not going to be able to prepare. We do these things, we do fire drills in schools, we have active shooter drills, especially with what's going on in the nation. We have what to do in case of a bomb threat. So that way, if it ever does happen, people don't panic and bad things don't happen. The same thing can be said about what's going on with this. When the Great Depression hit, nobody was ready. People were not prepared for what was going to happen during the Great Depression. And I would assume it was the same kind of thing going on, as people were living their lives, they were making money, they were going to work 9 to 5, doing what they were supposed to do, being a productive member of society, but somebody would come along and say, hey, did you know that the Rockefellers are making this much money a year? Well, how does that affect me? And then bam, Great Depression hits, many people are without a job, and it was the working class that was hit primarily during the Great Depression. It was hard to find work, people were not able to make ends meet, and it was really affecting families nationally. And we just weren't prepared for it. So that is why this is as big of a deal as it is because we are in all these areas, but we are not preparing the community for what's going on. There's nobody out there advertising this. I bet if we put up a billboard in downtown Houston about this thing, we would have way more attendees than we do now. If we asked for a higher call for papers, we would have more ideas presented that would, in biology you look at population diversity, whereas here we would have a lot more diversity of ideas. We would have more people with solutions that, even though they don't fit the mainstream of what we should do, hey, we need to know if they could say, oh look, this might work, and it might actually work. So the problem is information and communication. We don't communicate very well about these issues. Because one of the things people say is, what's one thing you don't talk about with your friends and family? And that's religion and politics. Now, this is political. This has become political. And it's something that people do not want to bring up for fear of, let's say, alienation. When I talk about my ideas, especially at work, even at school, people look at me like I'm crazy. They think, no, Hunter, that's not going to work, that's stupid, I don't agree with you, and the conversation shuts down right then and there. And I think that's a big problem is people have made it partisan for one, on a national scale, they've made it partisan. And Dr. Twice pointed out that Democrats and Republicans want pretty much the same thing. They have the same ideals of what it should be. So by making it partisan, we divide the country first. Then, by alienating the people with radical ideas that may have worked, we are splitting even more. FDR's plan, New Deal, was probably not very popular at first. I would say when he first started, people were saying, no, something's wrong, that's not going to work. But sure enough, we see where we are now, we see what happened, history has written itself. It worked pretty well. There was some fallout, there was some negative effects, but that's to be expected. You can't have an entirely positive situation. So we're looking at communications, and the only program I have here that we have today is the economic inequality. That's all we're doing today. But we also have the first two others I could think of were the deliberative dialogues we offer, and then the hunger banquet. Now, for those of you who don't know, excuse me, I'm going too fast. The hunger banquet is you show up, you have to make a donation, you have to sign up. I'm not even sure how sign up works for it. you randomly pick something. You randomly get a draw, and that draw determines where you sit, what you eat, etc. And it's designed to reflect the nation. So there's going to be a smaller percentage of the high class available. So if you draw, the upper class, you're going to get a nice meal. You're going to sit in a nice place. You're not going to have to worry about much. But if you draw a low income class, you're going to end up maybe with a plate of rice and beans, and it's going to be very limited, and it's supposed to represent the way America works. And it's a really great idea. The way it presents it is great. The problem is, again, it's communication. We're not communicating to the people in these communities that, hey, we have this hunger bank, come check it out. To get them to come out, to use that emotional, that pulling on the heartstrings of them, to think, man, there's children that don't get to eat tonight because of this inequality, because there's just not enough money to go around. There's no way for their parents to provide for them or for them to be provided for. So they end up homeless, they end up with nothing to eat, they end up just living in these deplorable conditions. And it would definitely benefit as if we could communicate this a little better, if we could put this out there saying, hey, come to this, come check this out, and then maybe get people more involved. And then we have the deliberative dialogues, which are essentially, they're structured dialogues. You get a couple of people in a group and you separate them, and you have a moderator to keep the conversation on topic, and you have these questions. I went to one, it was about, I believe it was about political contributions, if I'm not mistaken. I think is what we ended up talking about, but it was about limitations on political contributions. And there are some people that believe there should be no restriction on these contributions. And there are some people that say, and you get these that say that you should restrict them. And you get a whole bunch of different ideas bouncing around, and then you put this into a real world position. Like, what can we do? What do you think we could do better? Now, this is a great first step, because if the college takes these ideas of what can we do better, what can we learn from these conversations from, and it's normal people it's average, everyday people that are invited to this. You don't have to be a student, I don't believe, to go to these deliberative dialogues. I believe it's open to the community. Open to the community, which is great. You get people involved, you get people thinking, and then these people can take it back to their communities and say, hey guys, you know what, I got this novel idea, let's try it, put it into place. But the problem is we're not communicating. We're not letting these events be known. We're not putting these events out there. Now you might say a billboard would cost a lot of money, which they're not cheap, that's true. But think about this particular event. As a student, you had to pay $10, and I think it was $45 for a non-student, and then $65 if you paid today to get in. It's a good bit of money. I mean, it's a relatively good bit of money. Now, there is expenses associated with this, but if you communicate a little better, you could have, it would pay for itself. So, while there are some challenges that arise from trying to communicate these, to get them out into the community, they are far outweighed by the benefits you will receive from them. And it just seems like we really need to get out there and get this. And so now we're going to hit with the pedagogy of this. So the first point that's kind of vague, and I like that. Can you teach income? Can you teach someone how to earn a living? Can you teach someone how to spend their money? Can you teach someone how to make decisions that are going to be economically beneficial for them? And the answer is yes and no. You can. I can sit here and teach you all day that you need to save your money, you need to budget, you need to make sure you have a plan in place, you need to have savings, you need to have, etc., etc., etc. But what's stopping you from going out and spending your money but you? There's nothing stopping you but you. So I can sit here and talk until I'm blue in the face about how you should spend your money, how you can earn more income, how you can save more money, how you can do this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, you're going to go home and do with your money what you will, because it is your money. You have earned it. And so teaching income is really not a good plan. It's not a good idea to teach someone how to spend their money. They're probably not going to listen to you. And then we'll say, what about teaching them how to work? Well, yes, we can teach them a skill. We can teach them a craft. I can teach somebody how to weld or work on a car. No problem. Now, to be more advanced on it, that takes a little more work. But to go out there and do oil changes or to start welding pieces of metal together is not difficult to teach. So I can teach somebody how to work. I can teach somebody what to do to find work. I cannot teach somebody work ethic. I cannot stand up here through a lecture, or even if I started a program, if the college gave me my entire program and said, here, I want you to instill work ethic in these individuals. At the end of the day, there's nothing you can do to instill that work ethic. It's something you learn from a young age. It's something you grow up with. Occasionally, you will change the way you think about it based on your experiences in life, based on things that you've seen happen to other people. But more or less, it's going to come down to how you were raised and what you want to do. Everything comes down to your want, to your motivation. If you don't have motivation to go to work, if you don't have motivation to not spend money, you will not. Pure and simple. There's no way around that. So while we need to have these outreach programs into the community, we don't need to focus on teaching them how to earn money or teaching them how to work or trying to teach work ethic. Now, I'm not saying the programs are not good. We do have some great programs with like continuing education to teach somebody the basic skills they need to find work. But we need to focus less on teaching them and more on informing them. Now, they're very similar in meaning when you teach and inform. But when I say informing, we need to inform them of, one, the problems, such as income inequality and what they can do about it. Inform them about inform them about money itself. And a lot of people take money for granted. They look at it as it's a number in a bank account, it's a piece of paper in my wallet. Now, that's a little dumbed down, but essentially people are going to look at money as just a form of something to use, not a form of something that can work for them, essentially. So we need to stop trying to teach, and we need to start trying to inform. Inform them of the consequences of not, managing their income or work ethic, because there are consequences, as we all know. If you don't go to work, you don't get paid. Pure and simple. And if you don't get paid, it's harder to survive, and it's a snowball effect. So we need to focus more on informing the communities rather than trying to teach them. So, solutions. This slide is intentionally left blank. I did not forget about it. I didn't slack. It wasn't a last-minute thing. No, I intentionally left this page blank. And there's a couple different reasons. Philosophically, I can say because it looks cooler and I can throw in whatever idea I want, which is kind of true. I've been trying to do that throughout the presentation and not just bring it down to one solution slide, because one solution slide is not enough. By saying I have one slide or two slides or three slides of solutions is like saying I have the answers to your problems, because I don't. I have the solutions I believe will work and that I think are good ideas, but in practice may be completely horrible and may bomb. So I left this blank as more of like a thought, as more of a think about it type thing. Is what do you think you can do within your community as solutions to these problems? Because we all come from different areas. It's like Dr. Tice was saying, we have people coming from different states. I have no idea about the demographics over in the New England area or in Arizona or anywhere but where I'm at. So I know how I can influence my community, but I have no idea how I can influence your community. If your community is full of people that have always lived in low-income wages, they're not going to be able to sit there and come up with and say, all right, we need to start a savings account. If you only have $5 left when you're done paying your bills, it's really hard to make a savings account. It's really hard. I mean, $5 every 2 weeks is $10 a month, is only $120 a year. That's a drop in the bucket. And that could be emergency money. It could be whatever. But I don't know the particular communities in which you are located, so I cannot propose an exact solution. Just what I believe would be good ideas. And that's what I've been doing throughout the whole lecture, and that's what this is. It's more of a think about it. Think about your community. Think about the demographics of where you're at. Think about what you can do to influence your community, because that's what we're all here for, is to think about economic inequality for one, and then what can we do about it? Because again, we have a responsibility to help. We have a responsibility to use what we can and what we know to help others in need. If we don't, what are we really? Are we even a community anymore? We're not. If it's all about the individual, things are just going to get worse. We need to be a community. We need to be together. And if I have the ability to help somebody, I'm going to. If I see a guy that needs a coat because it's cold outside and he has no place to live, and I have a coat that I'm not using. Here you go, sir. Here's your coat. You know. Now I'm not for redistribution of wealth. I'm not for, you know, take from the rich, give to the poor.
But we do that all the time.
Exactly.
Taxes.
It's not the best way to do things by any stretch of the imagination. It leads to problems down the road. It leads from you taking away from those who have earned and giving to those who haven't. Because as you take away from those who have earned and give to those who have not, you will make the ones who have earned want to not earn. You will be providing an incentive to say, look, if you sit around and do nothing, you still get stuff. And it's frustrating. So solutions was intentionally left blank. I'm not a slacker, I promise. I don't think I am, at least. My wife may have another story. But there we go. It's all about looking at it as a community and as an individual community, as your community. And then eventually, once we have our community solutions as we need them, that'll work in our areas to where this particular, like let's say the Houston area, doesn't have a problem with income inequality anymore, or has a relatively small problem with income inequality, then we can spread to the state level. Then we can look at Texas as a whole, or Arizona as a whole, or let's say New York as a whole, and start to create programs that will help there. And of course, we can't be everywhere at once. Not possible. Excuse me. But we can apply these solutions and we can inform enough people and we can provide enough people with what they need to be informed, make their own decisions, and change so that we won't have to be everywhere at once. If we create a population of people that are all community-minded and they're all looking for a group goal, they're not working towards, I'm going to get to the top of the ladder, I'm going to be the boss, I'm going to make the most money, then we achieve a higher state of living, a higher standard of living, a higher state of teamwork, and that's what we really need. That's what we need is the information, and we need to take the programs we currently have and actually use them in the community and not just try to focus on our schools, but the communities in which they reside. Because 34 schools and 16 school districts is a lot of people to only be focusing on those 34 schools.